Excellent answer.
ಅಪ್ಪ ಈ ಸತಿ ನೆಟ್ಟಗೆ ನೋಡ್ಕೋ ಸರಿನಾ ಅವಲ್ಲೇ ಕೊಟ್ಟರು ಅವ್ರು ನಾಲ್ಕು.
You leave this. You leave this. You leave it. Huh? No, it's okay. You can leave these tables. You leave. Chairs you just remove. That's all. So welcome back to the post-lunch session. The post-lunch session has had its effect on the audience actually. So nevertheless, we'll go ahead with the next talk. This is a Novartis sponsored session. So we are going to discuss the molecule brolucizumab and how we kind of use it in AMD DME, and also we'll discuss about Accentrix, which we've been using for several years now. So among the armamentarium that we've been having as vitreoretinal surgeons, we are thankful that the new molecules are being used, and we have kind of learning how to use these molecules effectively. We have three speakers today who are going to speak on AMD and DME with brolucizumab, and we have Dr. Pratibha who is going to speak on, can I have the first slide please? She's going to speak on Accentrix. So our first speaker for the day is Dr. Devendra. He's an alumnus of Shankar Netralaya and then fellowship from LVPAI, and presently he is the consultant at Lakshmi Eye Institute. Has many publications and presentations to his credit. So he's going to talk on his experience with brolucizumab.
Thank you, sir. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks to Bangalore Ophthalmological Society and Novartis for this invitation. The lunch may definitely have had its impact on the audience, but as long as it has not had an impact on the speakers, I think we should be safe. I'll quickly start with my experience of using Paginax over the last 4 years. And I'll start with this first patient who, I think I put up the moral of the story right up in the beginning, where it is delay is costly. So this gentleman came to us first in May 2020 during the height of COVID, and he had already been treated for right eye CNVM with one ranibizumab. The left eye had only dry AMD, and this was the OCT at presentation. So it was a no-brainer. We continued with second injection of ranibizumab. Again in July, he received a third for continued activity. And then there was a gap of about 2 months when there was COVID in the family, he could not travel, and then he came with drop in vision in the left eye also. And you can see that both eyes have now huge PEDs. But surprisingly, and sometimes patients throw us these bouncers, they say that first you rectify my first eye and then we'll see about the other eye later on, which is very hard to counsel against. But because of this delay in treatment, we'll see what happens towards the end. So we continued with ranibizumab in the right eye, and the left eye, after a month, he was convinced for treatment. So this was the 5th ranibizumab in the right and first brolucizumab. At this point in time, brolucizumab was made available, and this was the first patient I had treated with Paginax. And you can see that at that point, my thinking was that, we can offer him a different potentially better treatment in one eye, but he was very happy to continue with ranibizumab in the first eye. So this ended up sort of being a natural experiment where one eye was treated with ranibizumab and the other eye was treated with brolucizumab. Now, you can see that now subretinal scarring is setting in the right eye. And because it was the first brolucizumab, we were very concerned about those reports of intraocular inflammation. So we did all these montage photographs just to make sure that there was nothing going on, and there really was nothing going on. So a month later, there was requirement for treatment in the right eye, and at that point in time, I was following 3 loading doses of brolucizumab, which I have subsequently stopped doing. But here you can see that even with 1 injection, the retina is dry, although of course the PED is persistent, but I've continued to treat with 3 loading doses. And our 2-day and 3-day checkups just to ensure that there was no IOI were continuing. These were the early days of treatment, where I think the concerns were very highly magnified and have been subsequently proven to be not so concerning at all over the last 4 years. So these were the continued story of this patient. This is in the month of December, where he received a 7th ranibizumab in the right eye and the 3rd loading dose of brolucizumab. And in January, both eyes appeared to be quiet and we just observed. But in Feb, there was recurrence in both eyes, and so he continued his 8th ranibizumab and 4th brolucizumab in the right and left eye respectively. At this time, we had access to Optos, so we could very clearly document that there was no IOI. This is just was done out of academic interest. It's not part of our protocol anymore. At March now, when there was a recurrence in the right eye, the patient himself said, why don't we switch over to Paginex, because I'm doing better with the left eye than I was with the right eye, so please let us stop all these multiple ranibizumab, 8 ranibizumab, and then he switched over to Paginex in the right eye. And this story continued with another 5th Paginex in the left. There was times of disease quiescence and requirement for retreatments. And this is a fairly long story, which I'm going to cut short in interest of time. But you can see that the continuous difficulty of retreatments is such an important hurdle to overcome. In October 2022, he underwent cataract surgery in both eyes, and the vision in the right eye has now improved to 6.9 N6 and the left eye 636 N18. But with continued disease activity, and 5th and a 6th brolucizumab in the right eye, 9th in the left eye, 10th in the left eye, and then this was the last follow-up just 2-3 months ago when both eyes were quiet. And at the end of all of this 4 years of treatment, he has 6.6 N6 vision in the right eye and 6.36 N36 vision in the left eye. So I've just summarized all of these OCTs and visual acuities in a sort of timeline, and you can see the up and down course of the disease and good disease free intervals. You can see once we started switching over to brolucizumab, obviously there is a downward trend of activity in any case of AMD, but you can see that the disease interval between treatments is definitely increasing. And for example, in the right eye, the last injection was given more than a year ago, so we are receiving some amount of disease-free activity now in the right as well as in the left. Unfortunately, the visual acuity in the left is not as good as the right, simply because of that initial delay in treatment. So I think it's very important to strike hard when the disease starts immediately and try to treat as early as possible and as effectively as possible. My next case is that of a one-eyed patient. She is an 80-year-old female who had difficulty in coming to the clinic multiple times. She had already lost vision in one eye due to AMD, and here you can see the photographs which show you the extensive RP alterations in the left eye, and now the right eye since a month has drop in vision with hard exudate, subretinal hemorrhage. And these are the OCTs. The left eye has almost a cavitation of the retina, and the right eye has this PED and subretinal and intraretinal fluid. So at this time, she was a one-eyed patient, elderly patient, and treatment-naive patient, and all of these conditions were there, but I still treated her with Paginex. I don't see any reason not to in retrospect either. And at that time, again, we were giving loading doses, so this was 3 loading doses, and subsequently there was disease-free interval for 4 months, a 4th injection after 4 months, and subsequent quiescence. And you can see that at final follow-up about 2 years ago now, she's totally restored her visual acuity to 6.9 N6 and injection-free from this. At this visit, she was injection-free for 8 months. My third patient was a traveler in a sense that he used to come to Panvel, where I practice, from close to Pune, which is about a 2-hour journey, and 80-year-old gentleman who used to bring his son along with him, and already had received 4 Avastins in the past and had an active CNVM in the right eye and a scar in the left eye, again a one-eyed patient. And you can see that every time I inject Avastin and I counsel him to come back after a month, he's never able to come back after a month, and he always comes back after 2 months. And you can always see that the disease is active, and he keeps dropping in vision. And we're just ending up under-treating this eye, and his near vision is consistently deteriorating, which is what his main concern is, because he was an avid reader. So subsequently, I strongly counseled him that since you are not able to follow up so frequently, we should change the treatment, and I started treating him with Paginax. This is the first injection in the month of July 2021. 2 months later, there is significantly less edema than he had when he was being treated with Avastin, although there's 2 months gap. A second injection, a third injection, and you can see now that the visual acuity is also, luckily for him, being restored. He's regained N6 near vision and 612 for distance. A fourth injection in January 22, long period of disease-free interval of almost 7 months when he required a 5th injection of Paginax in August. And this was the final follow-up where he had almost a 7-month free disease interval. So you can see that we've definitely been able to restore his reading vision and also increase the treatment interval and also the follow-up interval, which I think is a great blessing for such aged patients who depend on others also for their travel and treatment. This patient was one who is what we can call a recalcitrant kind of CNVM. He first came in the month of May 2020, and we were treating him with ranibizumab, and this is the second, this is the third, some disease-free interval, 4th ranibizumab, and a 5th and a 6th, and the treatment just keeps going on. And we see such kinds of treatment generally in patients who have insurance or who are getting reimbursed for their injections. Otherwise, it's very difficult to convince patients for continued treatment, especially if this is the worse eye. This was the 8th ranibizumab, the 9th in June 2022, and subsequently the 10th. I don't have the OCT, unfortunately, for this visit. And this was February 23, when you can see that the visual acuity has unfortunately kept deteriorating, 6, 18, and 24. When he came back in June 2023, there was subretinal hemorrhage, which accounts for the significant drop in vision, CF 2 meters, when we decided to switch him over to Paginax. And there was a very salutary effect. His visual acuity did improve significantly. Of course, part of that can be ascribed to the resorption of the subretinal hemorrhage. And this was the September 23 when everything was fairly quiet. And a second Paginax was given in February 24. So that was his last injection. This is in his last follow-up in May. So once again, just to show you, once we started switching over to Paginax, we have got significant increase in the interval of treatment, and therefore necessitating a little less rigorous follow-up. My last patient, I'll call the motto of this case, caught early. Now, he is also a one-eyed gentleman, and he's stone deaf. So he's essentially, two senses of his are affected, and he really depends on this one good eye for vision. He came last year in August 2023 with 612 N8 vision, and you can see the activity of the occult CNVM or type 1 CNVM. We initiated treatment with brolucizumab. This was the first injection, the second injection after a month, third injection after 2 months after that, and this was in March 2024 with 6/9 N8 vision, and April, 4th injection, and this was the 5th in the month of May. And this was his final follow-up just a few days ago. Now, you can see that the disease is still active, but he still has 6/9 and 6 vision. So with intensive treatment, 6 injections over a period of almost 11 months, although he requires many injections, he's maintaining his very good vision in the only eye that he has. So, there was a lot of talk of whether we should reserve Paginax for recalcitrant cases only, and I went through my data and I found that amongst the patients I have treated or eyes I have treated, I've given almost half of them in treatment-naive individuals. And I think that these individuals may have done better with Paginax simply because they would have been more compliant with treatment. We would have treated more aggressively at an early stage of the disease rather than losing time and losing vision with less effective treatment modalities. So just to summarize, I have found brolucizumab in my experience to be very effective in both forms of cases, whether it's treatment naive or recalcitrant cases. There has definitely been a reduction in the number of treatments over a period of 6 months or over a period of 1 year or over a period of 2 years. And this is simply because of the increased treatment interval. And with aggressive treatment, we can definitely maintain good visual acuity. I'm happy to say, touch wood, after so many number of injections over the last 4 years, I have yet to see a case of intraocular inflammation, if that is still on somebody's mind. But I find it to be very effective and very safe in wet AMD. Thank you so much for your patient hearing.
Thanks, Dr. Devendra. That was a very elaborative and very enumerative set of cases that you showed. I have a couple of questions for you. Dr. Devendra has a hard stop at 3, so we need to let him go. Before that, I will conclude the discussion with him. So is there anything different that you do with Pagenax which you don't do with other anti-VEGFs? That is one question. Do you take any, is your consents different? Are your follow-ups different? Do you use any topical steroids or subconjunctival? I've seen people using subconjunctival steroids with Pagenax. Do you do anything differently at all?
Okay. So the first point is that the one thing that we don't do is combine Pagenax with cataract surgery. This is also a theoretical risk because there may be an increased inflammatory burden or inflammatory load, whereas you may be very comfortable to give Pagenax in an eye, Accentrix or some other molecule in an eye while you are doing cataract surgery. We still don't follow that when it comes to Pagenax. We first give the Pagenax and maybe 2 weeks later we do the cataract surgery. The consent form is totally different. The consent form specifically mentions risk of IOI as has been reported in randomized clinical trials, and we also discuss this with the patient. So there's a full disclosure on all the potential side effects, but at the same time, I do reassure them that I have yet not had any such instances. So that is taken care of. Regarding post-operative regimen, I only prescribe the routine antibiotic eye drop, which I use for all intravitreal injections. I don't prescribe any other steroid or non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs.
Any difference in the consenting?
Yes, there is a separate, we have a separate consent form for aflibercept, a separate consent form for brolucizumab, a separate consent form for bevacizumab, and for ranibizumab. So we have 4, and for Ozurdex. We have 5 different consent forms, and for triamcinolone also, and now for faricimab. So the number of consent forms are just increasing with time.
Right.
It's not a blanket intravitreal injection consent.
So what is the minimal interval between 2 injections for you for the same patient? Let us say we have a bilateral CNVM. For example, in one of the cases that you showed, the other eye also developed, you switched from ranibizumab to Pagenax. Yes. So is there an interval that you have in mind when you treat your bilateral cases, or because each of them, if they require loading doses, is the number 5 and 6 bear anything on your mind?
So that's an excellent point, sir, and your talk in the morning session about treatment regimens is very relevant, and it was a very nice talk. I have stopped doing loading doses. Initially, I was trying to follow Hawk and Harrier, which are the qualifying trials of Pagenax to the T, which involved giving 3 loading doses. I've subsequently stopped that, and I think it is prudent not to give loading doses with the use of Pagenax, simply because there may be a potential higher risk of intraocular inflammation, as has been shown in the studies of RVO. Having said that, I generally follow a treat and observe kind of regimen where I inject and then I call the patient initially for after 4 weeks or 1 month. If there is no disease activity, I gradually start increasing the follow-up period from 1 month to 6 weeks to 8 weeks, and I inject only in case of recurrence of disease activity.
Right.
So this is how
bilateral cases, what is the minimal interval between 2 eyes?
Between 2 eyes, it's at least 48 hours apart.
Okay.
At least. But generally for matters of convenience, scheduling, timing, it may be going up to 5 days to a week.
Right. Okay.
What is the importance of having different consents for different injections?
So I think there are certain aspects of each injection which are specific to that injection. For example, there is no, with regard to brolucizumab, you may wish to deliberately talk about the potential risk of IOI, so that has to be captured in the consent. For example, if it is an intravitreal steroid implant, you would want to talk about the risk of cataractogenesis and high IOP. So we've modified the intravitreal injection consent to include all of these. I think it makes it more specific, and it's better to do it in that way.
Yeah, even I completely agree with him. I think we should have different consent forms for different anti-VEGFs, because even, for example, brolucizumab is only approved for NAMD and DME. If you are giving it for an RVO, it becomes an off-label use. So I think we need to kind of bring about these things when we are consenting itself. It will make us more secure. Comment from Dr. Pratibha?
Yeah, Dr. Devendra, fantastic talk. I just wanted to understand, do you have any specification for identifying which patient you want to give brolucizumab when it comes to treatment-naive patients? So if you have any, suppose the cost is not a factor over there, then why did you actually choose certain patients specifically for treatment-naive injections?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I was not able to bring it out in the presentation. I think we are grossly underdiagnosing PCV. And most of the patients in which treatment naive I have treated with Paganax have OCT features which are highly suggestive of PCV. The reason we are underdiagnosing is because we don't do ICG routinely, which is the gold standard, but there are plenty of now OCT biomarkers which can tell us that this is likely to be PCV. So in most of those treatment naive patients, I have been using Paganax as a first line. And I find that it is, anecdotally, I completely confess, or empirically, it is potentially much more effective in PCV patients, especially for the PED attack. I know we are not treating PEDs, we are treating intraretinal and subretinal fluid, but the disease lying underneath the RPE, I feel, is more effectively attacked by Paganax than potentially by other molecules.
Yeah, it's kind of quite debatable that when you have a very strong molecule, you can always debate either way. Why use a strong molecule for a small lesion versus, why not start treating it early? But we know the type 1 CNVMs and the PCVs don't really are kind on us. So better to use a very potent molecule initially, and thanks to the pharma that we have some good molecules now available. I think Paganax is one of them, and without hesitation, I think we should start using. Did you start with treatment naive, or you kind of accumulated your experience with the chronic cases, and what was your number when you felt that, now I am comfortable and I will start treatment naive?
So I don't know if it was a question of the patient being treatment naive or the doctor being naive, but I felt I was safest using Paganax if I followed the Hawk and Harrier. And Hawk and Harrier talked about 3 loading doses, and they talked only about treatment naive patients. I felt the literature support was best if I treated in this manner. So that's why I started treatments with treatment naive cases. And subsequently, once things went well, I started initiating in recalcitrant patients. So I may have gone around it in an absolutely 180-degree method, but that was my story.
Great, yeah. So if there are any question from the audience, we can take 1 or 2 questions. Yeah, please go ahead.
To poorer visual outcome? Because if we look at fluid study and all, there should be some amount of fluid, like tolerance to fluid is a good thing.
I agree with your point. I don't know if, because we gave 3 loading doses, if that is what you mean.
Yes, yes.
But, that has not been borne out in RCTs with regard to Paganax specifically, first of all. Second is that, if you did look at the OCTs very carefully, the right eye still had 6/6 vision and intraretinal fluid, and I've still observed it. So there are cases where, you may take an individual call whether you feel that this patient requires retreatment or not, specifically depending upon the symptomatology and the visual acuity. So for example, if it's a 6/6 patient and he's not complaining of recent drop in vision, even if the OCT shows some fluid, I'm a little tolerant. I may not call him after 4 weeks, I may call him after 2 weeks or 3 weeks. But your point is well taken, that sometimes the fluid is not the, you can tolerate some amount of fluid. Whether in that case specifically it was the delay in initiation of treatment, which I personally feel was the culprit, or whether it was over-aggressive treatment. Once, already the fire is caught and you are now creating water damage by trying to extinguish that fire, I don't know the answer to that.
Sometimes I wonder whether it's our tolerance or inability to dry the macula.
Yes.
So thank you, Dr. Devendra, and from the Bangalore Ophthalmic Society, we thank you for sharing your experience.
Thank you
with
so
us.
much.
Thank
It was
you.
a wonderful
So
opportunity.
the next
to
talk is
interact.
from Dr. Sangeeta. You can probably come up on stage. carry on. Thanks. Have a safe flight. So our next speaker is Dr. Sangeeta Jain. She is a VR surgeon from Dehradun, works at ASG Eye Care. She did her graduation, post-graduation from Marathwada University, Aurangabad, and then subsequently fellowship trained at with Dr. Nagpal at Ahmedabad. And she is proficient in managing all the vitreoretinal cases individually, and she is going to talk on her experience of dealing DME cases with brolucizumab.
Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I thank Bangalore Ophthalmic Society and Novartis for this presence or invitation over here with you all. So as we already heard from Dr. Devendra regarding brolucizumab, how effective the drug is in CNVM, which is, I think, the highly demanding disease for anti-VEGFs. But besides that, we have a lot of DME patients also. And I think even in our fraternity, a lot of people, they are suffering from diabetes and probably will have diabetic macular edema in our family, family relatives and all. So what will be our drug of choice? That was the question which raised me to create this presentation. So I found brolucizumab as a game changer in DME armamentarium. This is my disclaimer. No financial interest. If you look at the UN resolution and if you look at the diabetes as such, which is causing a disastrous event for us all over world, where India is coming up to be the hub of diabetic patients. So we are expected to cross nearly 100 million diabetes by 2030. And the reported prevalence, as we all know, in DR is 17.6 to 28.2%, which is approximately 6.93 millions. So number of people with diabetes in India currently are 69 million, of which 36 million remains still undiagnosed. So if we look at the number of cases, they are coming up with blindness because of diabetic retinopathy or diabetic macular edema. They are increasing day by day. And now we come, as we already discussed, about the burden of DME therapy on healthcare systems. It's multifactorial, as we all know. So how to reduce this DME burden from our patients and make more compliant treatment to them so that we can save their vision. If we look at the treatment burden, that can lead to adherence and persistence problem in that. As Dr. Devendra already mentioned, the distance traveled by patient along with a person who is accompanying him is probably the highest cause of non-persistence with the treatment, along with subjective distraction, financial burden, and social isolations. I would like to share only few cases of mine in DME over here. This very interesting case. He is a civil court judge, 38 years only, diabetic last 5 years, had multiple injections in last 2 years, like 17 injections. Left eye had 660 and right eye 636. If you look at the OCTs, serial OCTs of him, in June 22 when he came after 17 anti-VEGFs, this was his right eye and this was his left eye. Look at the spongiform macular edema over there in bilateral, and he's not able to read his files. So at this point he asked, ma'am, kuch naya aaya hai aap kya injections mein? Otherwise I'm giving Accentrix and Avastin, that's it. So when Paginex came in, probably after few launch he was resistant to, but when he had gone through Accentrix and all, he stopped. He said, no ma'am, let's try something different. So this was first injection, and after that in July 22, this was the macula. There was a huge drying up of fluid and his vision was improved to 612, 618. He was able to read his file, but still there was macular edema intrasensory. So, but still we were waiting, and even patient wanted to wait because how can area study says, yes, the drug is effective for 2.5 months to 3 months. And he was doing well in between. After that, he presented again in January 23 with such a kind of presentation, again going to the first phase, but still there was a gap from June 22 to January 23. So the patient was without injection for 6 months nearly. And after January 23, he again got his second Paginex done here. and he reported in May 23 nearly 4 months gap, but in left eye he was not doing well. So left eye, again we required injection over here. Again he had a gap of June, July, and again he came back in August like this. Meanwhile, because of his work profile, he had lot of diabetic ups and downs. Despite insulin, he could not control that. And probably that was the systemic cause which is causing him to come up with this kind of OCTs. But after this August injection, we have seen him in October 23. This is again after nearly 3 months. The macula were completely dried, and at this point he was 6'9", and he was very happy working in court, and later on he did not turn up. After, if you look at the gap from October 23 to June 24, it's a huge gap. Still we had a very good OCT, but at this point there was little CME and left eye cataract was there. So because of the cataract and this kind of CME, he again had reduced vision to 636 in left eye, but right eye remained to be 6'9". So if we look at these high profile cases, and after 17 anti-VEGFs, definitely I am very happy to treat my patient with Pagenax, as it has increased the interval between 2 injections, the visual recovery, and patient compliance is more with the injection. This 68 years male, diabetic hypertension with mildly deranged KFTs, 4/60 in right eye and 3/60 in left eye, had 13 anti-VEGFs, IVTA earlier also. But if I looked at this OCT, I had given, she opted to have only one left eye Pagenax first, because she has already experienced so many injections. But after first injection, within 4 weeks, she had such a good OCT picture from where she has improved from only 4/60 to 6/60. This is a recent case, so I don't have much of follow-up of this patient. But apart from her deranged KFT, her diabetes is well leveled, so we are now planning to go for right eye anti-VEGF. 35 years female, working in bank, type 1 diabetic with deranging KFT with CRF. Both eyes she had 2/60 and she was about to lose her job because of her eyes. Treatment naive patient. If you look at pre-op, this was her condition on OCT. This was her octa images at pre-operative. We injected Pagenax at both the eyes, and this is post 3 months. She improved to 624, not beyond that. And this is at 6 months. We never required till, this is the last follow-up I had. Last 6 months, my single Pagenax is working, and at this point, she has maintained 624, 618, nothing more. I didn't ask her to come back for any more injections because you can see there is little foveal thinning also going on. So if we look at Hawk and Harrier, nowadays we are not following that. What we are following, treat, observe, and treat if required. In such a kind of cases, at times we need not have to give a second injection or third injection, looking into OCT pictures and her visual recovery. So if we consider this case, probably she might not require my second injection till 1 year also. And this has reduced her financial burden and saved her job also. 52 years female, diabetic last 15 years, hypertension while KFT was normal. Right eye TRD, which was finger count 1 meter vision. Left eye had DME, and we have treated her left eye from 360, first injection given. Still the fluid is there on 1 month. Here we have treated after 4 weeks. We have given her, though vision has improved, there was a huge fluid level. So we gave a second injection, and after second injection at 3rd month, she had 636, but still fluid was there. But at this point, the patient wanted to wait for 2 months as she has gone through literature, and we are still waiting for her to come for further follow-up. This 60 years male, again a very interesting case. Diabetes, hypertension, already lasered retina, no uveitis, glaucoma, already had 7 anti-VEGFs of Eccentrix, IVTA, and Avastin elsewhere. This was having a longer follow-up from September 2021, where we started giving Pagenax. After September, he lost his follow-up in between, though we asked. He came in March 2022. Again, we had the similar kind of OCT configuration with the similar kind of vision, but After this injection of Paginex, he has improved in his right eye, but left eye still he had fluid. So we injected the second dose here, and after April, when he came in June, still the fluid was there. Again, we gave third injection over here. But in August, if you look at this was the older patient of us when we were following Hawk and Harrier like 1, 2, 3. Still we had a gap. And in August 22, he has better vision to 612, 618. After August, he came after in October, but again he came back with this kind of swelling with again reduced vision to 4/60. But left eye he was doing well. But when we have seen in March 23, there was little bit swelling, but fluid was there, as rightly the question was raised recently with Dr. Devendra. Though there is fluid, but if the patient is having better vision, we should wait and watch. We should not overtreat. So this was an example where we didn't treat the patient and we are still waiting for him. This was his next follow-up, like May 23, again he dried up, but left eye still showing. August 23, from May to August, we had a gap, again we re-injected. From August 23 to December, again there was less of fluid in right eye, but left eye still persistently coming up. So with 5 to 6 injections, this is his last follow-up in June 24, recent. Right eye, he is maintaining a good vision, but left eye, he is still having fluid, and we have recently injected him with brolucizumab. But in between the phases came like this also, where we thought of probably should not inject further, probably he will not come up with macular edema. On the contrary, he is going with thinning. But if you look at the follow-up, within 2 months he came up with this kind of macular edema. So at times, we require very long follow-up with our patients because in DME, it's not like CNVM. The systemic uncontrolled cause a lot of injections to patients because of this kind of OCTs and vision reductions. So adherence to follow-up treatment, the non-adherence is 75% of patients receive incomplete treatment because of the financial burdens. So what proportion of patients who are treated with anti-VEGF injections are non-adherent to follow-up and treatment in your practice is a question we always need to think of and treat accordingly. So if we look at this all, as we discussed, these all add up to the cost, and so as to conclude, brolucizumab is one of the best drug what I can think is a game changer in our practices, which is highly effective in restoring the anatomy of eyes affected by DME, and even in stabilizing the visual acuity in both treatment naive and even to the eyes which are refractory to other anti-VEGF intravitreal injections. Thank you from bottom of my heart. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Sangeeta. That was again an elaborative case series with long follow-ups. Few questions from my side before we take a comment from Dr. Pratibha. Do you use Paginex as for a treatment of PDR? That is one thing in the absence of DME, and in those cases where there is PDR with the DME, have you seen any effect like where the fibrovascular fibrosed or there was an accelerated tractional detachment that occurred?
As Paginex is long-acting drug, so what I have seen in my practice is DME definitely we are treating, but in PDR we have lot of, I use it as my tool for surgical cases. I give Paginex 1 month prior, and so whatever the florid FEPs are there, they are very well fibrosed. So it works better. Even I have used Avastin and Accentrix, Razumab, everything, but still it's my choice of drug even for PDR and DME.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting because I have not used Paginex as a pre-operative tool as such. Maybe
yeah, it's
worth
financially burdening to patient, but if a patient can afford definitely we would like to.
Yeah. Any incidents of IOIs with?
Not at all. So nearly I have done 326 procedures till date,
right.
But I don't have a single IOI.
Right. Very interesting thing is that whatever IOI I had was with the case of PCV actually, and whatever I have read, discussed and heard, we have not seen IOIs in DME cases. Most of the cases happened in the case of CNVM and the PCVs. Generally in DME, the reason is not really well established, but we are not seeing DME cases having IOS with Pagenex.
Probably
Dr.
the
Pratibha, any
inflammation
comment?
of DME is higher than what the inflammation Pagenex can cause.
Maybe, yeah.
One single question for you is that when is it a pseudophakic macular edema, okay, and the condition is going on for a very long time, okay, and the patient is receiving multiple injections, and you plan to, give. So which will be your treatment of choice? You want to go with Pagenax, or you want to go with dexamethasone implant? So which will be your treatment of choice? The pseudophakic
It
DME.
totally depends on OCT markers. If the OCT markers are very significant, then probably I might go with Ozurdex, the dexamethasone implant. But if it is only a spongiform macular edemas post cataract surgeries all, then definitely Pagenex works better. And there was a question in earlier discussion whether we combine Pagenex with cataract surgery. So Dr. Devendra was commenting like he don't use, but I do use Pagenex with cataract surgery. What I feel is cataract surgery per se, whatever the inflammation has caused because of surgery, it is rightly taken care by the molecule because it is long-acting drug, it's fine in molecular weight, so the anti-inflammatory action will be better if we combine together. So even we give pre-op, but yes, if the chance is there, I'll definitely combine.
Any questions from the audience?
Devendra was specifically mentioning about it because of, in case of any inflammation that arises after the injection, it's a bit confusing whether the cataract surgery precipitated it or the injection precipitated it. I think that is one of the reasons why I don't combine the two
That is
together.
why it is not done. But the case selection matters there. If your case selection is perfect, then I don't think there is a problem because I have a series of nearly 32 cases till date where we have combined cataract and Pagenex.
I have a question, ma'am. The case number 3 you showed, so was it a phakic or a pseudophakic, ma'am? I think it was
Case
more
number
of cystoid edema. So,
So just 1 second, probably I need to go back in my.
and I have one more question. Among the spongiform, cystoid and the CRS type, so what is your experience with, is there any
So the drug,
difference in the response to
so
brolucizumab?
drug works in every macular edema what I have seen in my these many cases. But definitely it works much better with spongiform macular edemas because we can have that wow effect. Spongiform goes down. If there is a small CME, probably we are like CME has resolved. Even our inner satisfaction is very less with that, but drug doesn't know whether it is spongiform or whether it is CME, it works for fluid. It works for like anti-VEGF action. So it is effective in all the cases. I think I'm about to answer your third case.
Yeah.
Can I
Maybe
have
we
access
can
to
take
that?
it off stage
Sure, yeah.
because,
Okay.
we don't want to delay the next session. So thanks a lot. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
On behalf of BOS, kindly accept this small token. The next talk is going to be from Dr. Pratibha Hande. She's going to talk on the original biologic that is Accentrix. We've been using ranibizumab for a very long time, and I think we have understood the molecule and how to deal with the diseases pretty well with that molecule. And she's going to share her experience. She's presently working as vitreoretinal consultant at Narayana Nethralaya.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Bhargav, and thank you, BOS, and thank you, Novartis, for making me present this. Accentrix has always been my favorite for the time I started my practice. And it is a time-tested medication, so we all have grown with it and have been utilizing it in multiple scenarios. Accentrix was the ranibizumab molecule was first introduced or FDA approved for wet AMD in June 2006. So it has been an age-old molecule which has been there for a very long time. And in 2010, it was approved for BR Vivo, and in 2012 for DME. So this injection has always been with us, and once the patent expired in 2020, there has been a surge in the biosimilars in the market. So there has been an entire host of biosimilars in the market, and now if I want to pick up ranibizumab, I have a number of choices. So why should I actually go to the biosimilars? Basically, is the cost factor, agreed. And so am I doing right in actually choosing a biosimilar instead of the original molecule? And what are the caveats? What are the things that I have to think about, So do I actually, am I making justice when I actually pick up a biosimilar instead of the original molecule? There are multiple questions which arise over here. So this entire session, entire 10-minute discussion is going to be on that. So to understand the basic, idea about what these biosimilars are, we'll go back to the basics. Biologics or monoclonal antibodies, or whatever we're dealing with, belong to a group of drugs called biologics. So these biologics are produced by biotechnology in a living system, such as a microorganism, a plant cell, or an animal cell. And they're much more complex than your drug which comes out of a, say, chemical lab. So they're much more complex, much more larger molecules, and having multiple more atoms when compared to a drug which comes out of a chemical lab. So this is the key importance. So when you say a generic drug and a patented drug, so we are looking at bioequivalence. So when it comes to a biosimilar and original molecule, there can be a way of difference because the molecule itself is very complex. So having understood that, the original biologics or the innovator molecules are the ones which undergo a multiple amount of R&D. R&D itself runs for a few years before the drug is actually set to actually enter into the trials. And then another 7 to 8 years, the minimum goes into the evaluation of the molecule, whether it is sufficiently good enough for a particular indication. So after all these original biologics had to be rewarded, so we have the patent which covers it, so that the molecule has got a good amount of hold over the market for at least, say, around 20 years is the patent, I believe. So after this patent, several of the companies can actually mimic the drug. So this is where the biosimilars come into play. The biosimilars are the products which are undergone a proper regulatory agency approval, and with respect to the similarity, the quality, the safety concerns, and the efficacy of the product in comparison to the innovator molecule. So we do have bio-betters, which can be superior to the original molecules, or there can be biomimics, which are lesser than the innovator molecule, but just a copy, which looks similar to, which has a similar molecular structure, but may not have undergone the rigorous regulatory approval process. So we are going to limit our talk today to biosimilars. But however much the regulatory process has approved it, and we have the similarity between this and the similarity between biosimilar and innovator, but we still have to ask the question as to how similar are biosimilars with innovators. So for this, we have multiple things to ponder. The first and foremost is about the biosimilar manufacturing part of it. So just look at the complexity of the production of a monoclonal antibody, which is all the anti-VEGF what we're using. This is not as simple as a drug which is produced in a chemical laboratory. So this involves a lot of steps. The most important steps being the identification of the antibody, then putting it forward in a cell line culture, and then the culture has to be either a mammalian or a plant or a bacterium culture, and then you have to harvest that culture and produce the protein and extract the protein from the culture, and then this undergoes multiple steps of purification process and then formulation and packaging. So this is a very complex mechanism in which the monoclonal antibody is produced, and thereby there is a lot of chances of errors being introduced at various levels.
So once a patent is completed and the molecule is thrown into the public domain, what the biosimilar manufacturer actually gets to know is the DNA sequence, the protein sequence. And he will actually reverse engineer the DNA sequence based on the primary protein sequence of the reference drug. But what is unknown for him is all the other other steps which we just now discussed, the bioreactor conditions, the protein recovery condition, the purification methods, all these are to be derived on newly by the biosimilar manufacturer. So what is the final product can still be appearing the same, but can have multiple differences because of these reasons. Now, the biosimilar has been manufactured, but it has to undergo a stringent approval pathway. But how stringent are these approval pathway for the biosimilars? So globally, there is no fixed guidelines for the approval process. Each continent or each country has got its own guidelines. So the guidelines are also constantly evolving. Of course, this is a highly evolving field. Every now and then there are things that has to be revised. And I think the 2016 is the last time that Indian organization has revised these guidelines. But anyway, in all the scenarios, these are the three fundamentals based on which most of the governing bodies will formulate the guidelines. The first and foremost is the analytical studies to demonstrate the high biosimilarity, the molecular structure, whether it is similar or not. The second part of it is animal studies, where the toxicity assessment happens. The third part is the clinical trial on the humans, wherein the safety, efficacy, and the immunogenicity has been compared. Now, if you consider an innovator molecule, that is the original molecule, very little actually happens at the analytical characterization or the molecular characterization, of course, because it's a new molecule. But a lot of stress is actually placed in the non-clinical study, the pharmacological study, and the clinical studies. So you can see the amount of stress that goes over there, but that actually takes around more than nearly the same amount of time for the R&D of the molecule. So this is how an innovator molecule is actually brought out to the market. Whereas if you see a biosimilar development, it is actually a shortcut. So the biosimilar development, what happens in there is that there's a lot of emphasis is laid on proving that the molecule is in fact a replica of the original molecule. So the analytical characterization is given a lot of importance, whereas less and less importance is given to the non-clinical study, the pharmacological studies, and the clinical studies. So much so that in our country, the CDSCO, which gives approval for these biosimilars, has put in something of the level of 100 or more evaluable patient for any kind of a phase 2 trial for the approval of a biosimilar. Again, this is again in contrast to the equivalent of CDSCO in the American counterparts or in the European counterparts, wherein they specifically mention that the phase 2 study in biosimilar approval process has to be equivalent in design and power with respect to the original molecule. Whereas in India, the sample size that has been set up is very low, and this simpler regulatory pathway can induce a lot of loopholes. Another important point here is that when a biosimilar is already approved for a particular indication, it gets a blanket approval for all the other indications for which the mother or the parent molecule has been approved. So this is one of the important features, that they don't have to again go through separate approval for each and every indication. Coming to the immunogenicity and the safety concerns. So if you see the dents that we have in the manufacturing process and in the approval process, so we are bound to have some amount of safety and immunogenicity concern, which you have already seen in a few of the patients who ended up with some kind of an adverse drug reaction in specific batches of ranibizumab biosimilar recently. So this also, not only the safety concerns, but also has an effect on the potency of the drug because of the neutralizing antibodies which can actually retard the effectiveness of the drug. Now, are the current biosimilars interchangeable? This interchangeability is a word which is not found in our Indian context dictionary at all. This interchangeable biosimilars means the biosimilarity should be at a higher level before a drug can be approved to be interchangeable. Like suppose you've been giving the patient the original molecule and you want to shift over to a biosimilar. So there are guidelines elsewhere outside India that a particular biosimilar only can be used for switching, whereas in India we do not have. Once the drug has been proved to be biosimilar, it is taken for granted that it is automatically equivalent and can be given as a substitute. So coming to the question now, that are biosimilars equally efficacious? So we all might be having different thoughts about it. I myself have different thoughts about it. But overall, if you can consider it to be, to have a large database study, this is a recent study done in Disha Hospital with a large group of patients, 18,000 patients on DME and AMD, wherein it was definitely proven that the AMD efficacy as well as the DME efficacy with the innovator molecules is much more when compared to the biosimilar. Now, the whole idea of bringing about biosimilars was because it is going to be cost effective. It was the idea of introducing biosimilar and fast forwarding the approval, all is because of making it available for everybody. But are we actually doing justice in this is the question. Of course, there is a lot of deterrence factor in India with a lot of patients not having the insurance backup. All those agreed. But if we are having a good stringent measures to see the quality of the biosimilar, then it probably makes sense. But if suppose you are thinking that you're doing benefit by actually injecting more number of injections because the injection is getting washed away quickly, or it is less effective or less efficacious, or it is getting an immunologically mediated response, then probably the cost effectiveness doesn't play around at all. So next time we pick up biosimilar instead of an original molecule, it is better to have a thought process running in our minds about all these possibilities. So I will conclude saying that the biologics are very large, complex molecules, extremely difficult to manufacture, and very stringent regulatory pathway is definitely required for the approval of biosimilars, and cost factor is something that definitely is driving us to use more and more biosimilars, but definitely we need to look back and see that whether we are doing justice when we are advising a biosimilar instead of the original molecule. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Pratibha, and if there are any questions from the audience, we can take that. I have a question, Pratibha. Do you switch between molecules, let us say Accentrix or a biosimilar, for any given one particular patient? Are you comfortable in switching from Accentrix to other molecules and coming back, or you would like to put the patient on the same molecule, not the molecule, the same biosimilar?
No, actually, I do less amount of switching between the original molecule and the biosimilar. So if I feel that the molecule is not working, then I might switch over to another molecule, completely different molecule, or probably in DME cases to steroids. But for me, shifting over between the innovator molecule to the biosimilar, or vice versa also, the biosimilar and then to the innovator molecule, I find it not very effective, so I usually don't do it.
Right. Any comment from Dr. Sangeeta?
We have a lot of biosimilars from different company for ranibizumab. Have you experienced any difference between these biosimilars, or they are the same?
Yeah, definitely. I have seen, I'll not mention it, but definitely yes, there's a large variation, and anyway, there are lots of biosimilars now started in the market, and definitely there is a difference in the biosimilars themselves.
Okay, so it's better to switch over from, if I'm switch over from Accentrix to anything, no, then not to biosimilar, then better to go to Pagenix. That is what you mean.
Yes. You can go for another molecule itself is what I usually follow. I don't say it is completely right. Do you have any thoughts, Dr. Bhargav?
No. I was worried about because of the vehicles which will change. So I was worried. See, I have ended up doing it for predominantly for insurance reasons. If their insurance runs out or something, and whenever I am forced to use that thought occurs to me that do I see now am I inducing a immunogenicity which was not there till now? So that's the reason why I asked for you.
Yeah, aptly said actually. Certain government bodies, if you write for the innovative molecule, they only approve the biosimilar.
Yeah,
That's
so in
also
those
there,
cases
yeah.
you will be
Then you're left with no choice.
correct, yeah. Right.
So probably
Are there
that
any
is
other
also
questions from
restricting-
the audience?
That is also restricting our usage from the original molecule over biosimilars.
Yes.
Right. I think we are concluding the session, predominantly in time. Thanks for your patience, and thank you, Dr. Pratibha from the Bangalore Ophthalmic Society. Kindly accept this.
ಸರ್ ಸರ್ ಫಾರ್ ಯು
ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ಸ್ ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಮಿಕ್ಕಿದೆಯಾ ನನಗೂ ಕೊಡ್ತಿದ್ದೀಯಲ್ಲ
ಇಲ್ಲ ಇಲ್ಲ ಅಟೆಂಡ್ ಮಾಡಿ